How's it going, everyone? Welcome, Elder Gonzalez again. Today we're gonna explore the quick overview of the React Native 3 made by Katie Kraman. She's a software engineer that previously worked at Formidable, a creative agency, and now she's currently a software engineer at Expo. This framework around React Native to build or to design, build, deploy, and monitoring your application, especially your mobile apps, whether it's on iOS and Android. Now, in today's video, we're going to do is the section like the introduction as well as the component and styling. So we're gonna get a more practical approach. I'm gonna make a quick recap of how do we get here, so to understand and be able to describe what is React Native at the end of the day. So this is just a way for Facebook to now close the gap between the web and the mobile development. So you have one language to rule them all, in this case to rule the development. And well, you have the React, which works on the web, and now this React Native, which the previous version of this used something called like the bridge, right? Where now you have an async bridge. That target is a platform-specific compiler directive, whether it's on iOS or Android, in Windows, right? But now they don't have that architecture. And you might say, how do you know that? You know? So this is now the old architecture prior to 2024. Particularly, let me be more specific here. Let me be more specific here with this, which is newer architecture, is this one. So they have some sort of async bridge where the communication between the JavaScript thread and the directive or the native directive of that application or that host, which is the iOS or the Android, they have now this way to target that. So because they now remove this async bridge, and now they have is their own. So in JavaScript they hold the reference to the CSS directive and vice versa. So they remove this async bridge. But the question is like, all right, how the things works behind the scenes, I would like to take a look at least a visualizations of this. So here is where we can look at the exactly, at least to understand is the architecture behind the scenes. So what is React Native for? Especially is the, let me see if this one, React programming paradigm. This is thinking in React, no. What we're defining this now. Frameworks. Not quite sure if here we can look at, let me see if I actually take the notes out of that. You gotta give me a couple seconds here before doing into that. And partner status, evolving in React. So how can we find this much more easily? Titles go here. This is the template, the web view, turbo models, Okay, but it makes a lot of sense here. So React Native use native models as a way for JavaScript to invoke functions in a Java or Object-C. Okay. Listed under the API section in React Native documentation. So this particular models or this native models made by Facebook, and there is no right now doing this native models in React Native. Yeah. Native models, that's right. So your React Native application code might need to interact with the native platform API that aren't provided by React native or existing library. You can write the integration code yourself using the Turbo Native model. Again, for library or for any directive that are not available. However, this is not what we are interested in. This is not what I interest because I just want to let me take a look at this. Let me see if this introduction actually describes the architecture here a little bit. Developer format, core components, and native components. View and mobile development. Native components, core components, React components, React native components, community components, core components, and your native components. React fundamentals, something that we are quite familiar with. Handle text input using scroll view, using list view troubleshooting, platform specific code, like so, and more research. Environment setup, integrate with existing apps. Okay, but running on device, upgrading to newer versions. Okay, legacy architectures, native models. Oh, this is part of the legacy architecture? Interesting. Native models and native components. Okay, yeah, because right now the currently version is on this. All right. What about, this is the guidelines, what about the architecture? That's right, this is exactly, okay. Architecture, here we are. This is the architecture. Okay. You can say React native architecture. Okay. You may wonder why this is important. Well, because this will lay out the foundations of how we're gonna build all of this kind of stuff, and then as we did that, or as we do that, we're going to understand how all of this different stuff works together. Yes, even though that in their documentation say, hey, you don't need to understand the architecture or how the things work, but the reality is that once you truly want to understand something, you will dive deep into that. You will figure it out. So, yeah, this is the architecture overview. This is now the new architecture for that. Also, the idea is to combine this is in 2017, React Native Bridge concept, blah 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 blah. And then you got it, right? Okay. That's very interesting, but you barely hear about that. Okay. that person actually okay, he just made that. Interesting. It's just one. Okay. There is another reason why you should actually have your own social media presence, so other people can actually see what you are doing and how you do that kind of stuff. Right now, this is also quite interesting. The hacker knows, but don't fall into the microservice are cool trap, and know when to stick to monolithic instead. Oh my god. But again, as you can see, this is it, right? Basically, this is it. Now, on that, okay, we're going to explore a little bit of the architecture and how perhaps that things work behind the scenes. So why a new architecture? After many years of building React Native, the team identified a set of limitations that prevent developers from creating certain experience with high polishes. These limitations were fundamental to existing design on the framework. So the new architecture started as an investment in the future of React Native. So the new architecture unlocked capability and improvement that were impossible in the legacy architectures, such as synchronous layout and effect. Building adaptive UI often require measuring the size of the portion of your view and adjusting layout. Today you will use the onLayout event to get the layout information in the view and make any adjustment. However, again, but this is not talking about the new architecture and what are the new capabilities that it support, concurrent rendering and features. In other words, you can concurrent rendering and features using transition, for example. So marking an update and lower priority tells React can interrupt rendering to handle higher priority updates to ensure responsive as user experience where it matters. That's mainly the TLDR. Fast JavaScript native interface. They implement now this JavaScript interface that allows JavaScript to hold a reference to C++ and vice versa, which is a memory reference. You can directly invoke method without serialization costs, without the process of transform that into something that can be or stored or transmitted. So this process, you eliminate that. And what I can expect from enabling the new architecture, right? Updates the event loop model, like this. Node and layout APIs, and styling and layout conforms. But again, the idea of this is to slowly but progressively understand this kind of stuff. So let's dive into the event loop process, into the event loop model, the node and the layout APIs, and the styling and conforms. Okay. This is something that we might opt to go with. Right now, the current app where the current or my current stint or job is that actually helping a company in the financial industry, a bank, to improve some of their particular processes that they have on the React Native, specifically the credit cards, which is a very sensitive topic, my friend. A very sensitive topic. So, in any case, here we are. Well defined the event loop processing model. This is the proposal to formalize the step that React Native follow to perform tasks on the JavaScript threads, and how that works is synchronous with the rendering works in the host platform. My question here is straightforward. Instead of actually reading all of this, All right. I just want to summarize this by asking questions, and that is, hey, Claude, I want to make a couple questions here, and one of them is the React Native? You take a look at this, right? Um, there you go. So, is according according to this link, how is the process being okay, in a consistent way? How uh, how JavaScript is executed, or how a React Native app works in iOS, or what is the mechanism? You know, so what is the mechanism in iOS? What is the mechanism in React Native to run on iOS or Android apps? Yeah, but he can access to that. But I'm happy to explain React Native mechanism for running the iOS and Android. That say, I can explain React Native core mechanism. Use JavaScript engine, particularly use the interesting JavaScript core in iOS and V8 Hermes on Android to run code in a separate thread. Here is when this concept of processes and threads kicks in. So a process is when a program, a set of instructions that contains now a program, is stored in a disk and then loaded into memory and executed by the CPU, that's become a process. So an important feature of processes is that they live in an independent memory address space. So other processes, if they misbehave, well, they don't affect other processes. So, couple example of processes: you have now program counter to indicate what is the next line that is being executed, the program counter, or the stack to look at the variables, function calls, and memory address returned. Also the register, so you can store data, which is a program to store that data. And this is part of the thread, specifically the single unit of execution that it lives inside of the processes has at least one thread. It is not uncommon for a process to have multiple threads. And these threads, since they are now live in the same memory address space of the processes, they can share data across these other threads. So it is more accurate to say that a thread is made of the program counter, the register, the stack. And JavaScript has a very specific implementation of the thread, right? So you have the global execution and function executions, the call stack, which is now keep track of which line of the code is currently evaluated, as well as the function call, the heap, which is the register, so the place where you're gonna put all of this, or you're gonna allocate memory here, and then the asynchronous nature of the JavaScript, which is the event loop, which is coordinating is the asynchronicity that can happen on a callback or a job queue, or the macro or micro task queue, which is just fancy names to say that. In the web APIs, which is now what are the functionality methods that this language can have access based on the platform that we run, whether it's on the web or on the server. So understand this and be able to describe this is important because, well, when you look at stuff like this, not the apologize, like, hey, it uses a JavaScript engine. We know that this particular JavaScript engine, whether it's on iOS or Android, to run a JavaScript going a separate thread, it means that in the same process, it runs this particular unit of execution, right? While communicating with native platform components through a bridge architecture. So this bridge serialized data between but this is something that is no longer, they don't do that. Okay, this bridge serialized data between JavaScript and native code. So it actually now transformed that data into something that can be transmitted or stored, in this case between that particular JavaScript thread and the native code, allowing React components to render as actual native UI elements rather than web views. Oh, allowing React components to render as actual native UI elements rather than web views. Would you like me to elaborate a specific aspect of this mechanism? Yes. Can you provide me the source of this mechanism explanation? All right. So let me now ask his perplexity for that, which is, hey, so based on the following link, all right. I don't want to repeat myself. What is the mechanism in React to run an iOS? Make your answer consist. The document from the provide GitHub link discuss a proposal for a well-defined, is that right? So, this structured approach intends to improve performance and reliability on that. I just want, event loop definition. It proposed a clear structure for the event loop, which is crucial for managing tasks, timers, and input events consistently across platforms. So it has its own event loop, pretty much like, oh my god, so pretty much like the Node.js has its own event loop, which different phases, which you have now the timers and then the pending callbacks, the idle and prepare, the input and output, the idle and prepare, the input and output, the close call. Let me take a look at the no architecture. No architecture diagram. I don't think this will give me no architecture, but this is no architecture. Or no event loop, to be more precise. That's right. Is this one? The timers, the pending callbacks, the idle prepare, the poll, the check, and the close callback. So this is now the mechanism or the design behind now the node to actually handle this input and output. So they have some sort of mechanism behind the scenes to do that. Is input and output events consistently across platform, similar for the timer and managing task. They also have this thread management. The proposal emphasize the importance of a separate UI and JavaScript thread to ensure smooth performance and responsiveness in application. And task scheduling. It outlines how tasks are scheduled and executed in the event loop, ensuring that high priority tasks are handled promptly with maintaining the overall efficiency in the application. So based on that link, describe briefly the event loop. Describe briefly the event loop, thread management, and task scheduling. Employs a multi-threading architecture where JavaScript execution occurs on a separate thread from the UI render. And this separation allows for smoother interactions as the UI remains responsive while JavaScript tasks are processed. So the new architecture enhances this by enabling synchronous communication between JavaScript and native layers, reducing latency and improving performance. So in other words, if we take a look at this, so it is safe to assume, because it's this one, this is something that happened right now. Okay, the new model will be aligned with the model of the web. Okay. Two threads. The UI and a JavaScript thread. Interesting. The UI host view directly, ensuring that UI update responsive and smooth. And then you have the JavaScript threads. The JavaScript thread execute React rendering logic, layout calculation, and other JavaScript tasks. This separation allows for asynchronous processing of JavaScript code without blocking the UI thread. Alright, which is crucial for maintaining the responsiveness, a responsive user experience. So based on this, and I'm gonna make this very clear, the architecture here in React applications with this newer architecture here, the newer architecture, if you take a look at this, we can now dive into this newer architecture. Okay, and this is now the new architecture overview 0.73, right? Right, so now it runs is the UI and the thread. These threading models enable React Native to efficiently manage that. So UI thread and the JavaScript thread. Give me a second here because I'll be right back. I'll go to the bathroom. All right, and we are back. So, another question here is that, okay, so this is the React Native architecture, UI thread and the JavaScript thread. So they have these two different threads that live on the same process, right? Another question is that because JavaScript is a single thread language, it means that each process or each thread is a different process. So since JavaScript is a single thread language, right? It means it has only one single unit of execution. It is safe to assume that in React Native apps, behind the scenes, it creates two different processes. Exactly. So create two distinct threads of execution: the UI threads and the JavaScript threads. Okay, I don't know if you get it, but since JavaScript is a single thread language, it is safe to assume that in React Native, behind the scene, you create two different processes: the UI process and the JavaScript process. Yes, React Native runs two main processes. So now it closed the gap because what we're doing is just drawing, looking at all of the different dots that you are looking at the relationship here. This process communicates via bridge that serialize between them. This architecture prevents JavaScript operation from blocking the UI rendering, maintaining app responsively. The newer architecture introduced after 2022, called the new architecture of Fabric, uses more efficient C++ core instead of the bridge, but still maintain process separation for performance and stability. So Fabric is now I'll call the new architecture or Fabric. Use a more efficient C++ core instead of the bridge. So things slowly but progressively started to make a lot of sense. So because at the end of the day, here JavaScript needs to be run on a platform that supports that. So instead of using now the web view, it's run on this main thread or on this JavaScript engine, right? That at the end of the day, React is just for building user elements on JavaScript using exclusively JavaScript. So because the main thread is not using is, in the case of iOS, the JavaScript core engine, and for Android is the V8. So because they take all of its instructions into JavaScript, which is the UI elements, they're now run in a separate process and also has a different process, the JavaScript process, to do that. So you have now the main thread, which is when the okay, when the rendering happens. All right, you make things like that. When the rendering happens, all right, and the JavaScript. Okay, when the rendering happens, and then you have now another thread, all right, or the JavaScript threads, where you can put some task on that, right? Whatever the task it is. So you have now these two particularly processes running, and when they talk about the JavaScript is when you have when you talk about that JavaScript running on multiple threads, it means that or the JavaScript has different threads, or this JavaScript application have different threads. It means that it has its own process. Period. Okay. Mm. In this particular case. Okay. All right. That at least throws some light into what we really need to understand about the architecture of how the thing is working behind the scenes. So yeah. As if you want to go and dive deep into all of these elements. As you can see here exactly, you have now the UI thread, scroll event, and the JavaScript threads, commit native state update, and the current shadow tree, and there you got it. But React Native, at least React Native, is now has two processes. One of the main thread, which is where the commit happened, the state update happened, with the React happened, and the others are the JavaScript tasks that can happen. Two built-in animation systems in React Native. Okay. Reanimated is widely used library for animations in React Native. In this case, all animation tricks are defined in the shadow tree, but updates are not synchronous with the JavaScript thread. That means that consistency guarantee defined in this proposal are not respected, so it will be possible to observe inconsistent values in the same JavaScript. So reanimated is so reanimated here. Okay. Gestures. Ooh, that shit is horrible. Sensor-based animations, keyword-based, share element transitions. Similar in Shopify, that kind of stuff. Expo and Shopify. Holy shit. Okay. Now we're talking. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. That's very, very interesting. That's very, very, very interesting. Okay, okay. I think I can find it. React Native. Mm-hmm. All right. Holy moly. Anyway, that was quite interesting. That was quite interesting, I must admit. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, 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 okay. So, again, it's quite important to understand now this architecture, to have the mental model here in your mind, the visualization here. And then, now, what we really care in today's video, which is actually uh, do what we need to do, which is start with the component styling and all that kind of stuff. All right, let's get into this. Finally, let's get into this. Let's definitely get into this. Okay, let's get into this.
Now to get started, we're going to start a new project. So open your terminal, and like I said, you need to have Node installed. So if you do node-v, you're looking for a long-term support version of Node. So that's always what you should be using. So long-term support versions are even numbers. So right now it's going to be 18, that's getting a bit old now, but 20, 22, in the future 24, etc. So I'll be using Node 20 here. And the other thing you need is a package manager. So I'm going to be using Yarn Classic, so Yarn 1.22, but you can.
So let's get into this. We're gonna go and say that enterprise UI development testing go, page intro, V3 app, basic operators, intro to Vue 3, no. React, there you got it. Okay, so it's going to open up this, but first I want to now is to create
any
the template
of these
of
will
the
work.
project.
And you can check the documentation here for this without installing them globally on your machine. And whenever you're doing a new command, I like to run it with --help initially. And this prints out some help information that usually tells you, it's just a convention, but it usually tells you what you can do with this script. So in particular here, what's useful for us is you can see that you can pass in a template or -t. So by default, when you npx create expo app, it uses the default template, and the default template isn't blank as of SDK 51. It comes with navigation pre-installed and some styling and a bunch of things to just get you started so you wouldn't start from blank and wouldn't be overwhelmed with choices. But in this workshop, we want to start from scratch and build everything as we go on. And the second thing that we're interested in is this thing on the bottom here, which tells you how to create this package, this new project, using your preferred package manager. So if you do npx create expo app, it actually uses Node by default, and you get a package lock. In my case, I want to use Yarn. So I'm going to copy this Yarn create expo app, give it a name, so I'm going to call it Taskly,
Yarn
and
create
-t,
app.
which will make sure that we get the prompt to choose our template. So from here we have an
Which
option,
is the
and let's
name,
choose the blank TypeScript
Taskly.
template.
Taskly minus T. Taskly minus T. So you have this minus T. Okay, so you're gonna create expo app taskly minus T. Now let's get into this. We create that. It will tell us that default include tools recommended for most app developers. That's exactly
so from
what
here we have an option,
choose.
and let's choose the blank TypeScript template.
Okay, let's go to choose a type blank TypeScript here. Okay. So whether we create now with the binary here in PNX, create expo app, and as you can see, it's unloading is quite fast, and there you got it. Okay.
Okay, so we created a project now called Taskly. So if we cd into our project directory and see what we created here. So this should be a pretty bare bones. Hello and welcome to this introductory course. Okay, so we created.
No, but where is the... There's no TypeScript. Okay. Okay. Okay, no problem. Chill. Chill, chill. Chill, 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 no problem.
We did a project now called Taskly. So if we cd into our project directory
Mm-hmm.
and see what we created here. So this should be a pretty bare bones project.
Exactly. So now let's go to that. Which is if we open up here on the folder and Taskly, that's right. Up, and there you got it. All right.
So we just have our package.json, our lock file, our main entry point, which is just a single file, app.tsx, and our app.json, which is a config file for your app. And in your package.json under scripts, you can see the scripts you can use to start your app. So you can use the start command, which you can see runs expo start. So to run the packager, so the JavaScript side of your app, you run npx expo start, or you can just run yarn start, npm run start, or whatever package manager start command you used.
Here, because they're using
So this now will
jar
give you a
for
QR code to scan. So basically, a React Native app consists of two parts. You have the JavaScript side, and you have the native app side. So this here is building the JavaScript side. So how do we get our native app side? For this learning course, we're going to be using ExpoGo for this. So get your phone.
It's because they're using is React for that.
Now on your phone, go to the App Store. If you don't have ExpoGo installed yet, search for ExpoGo and download it. And the app will look like this. So if you're on an iPhone, like I am, there is no button here to scan your QR code. So what you actually do is you open your camera app and you scan the QR code. Now, if this is the very first time you installed ExpoGo, this actually won't work the first time. And then, so I installed ExpoGo from scratch specifically to show you. So I've tried to just close it, and now I finally get this prompt that says ExpoGo would like to find and connect devices to your local network. And this is so it could actually get this package management. So I'm going to choose allow and go into the camera app and scanning this again. Now you should see something like this. So this is just your app, so the code that we have in our app.tsx running inside ExpoGo. Let me show you on Android as well. So on Android, it will be similar. So we're going to go to the Play Store. We're going to search for ExpoGo. We're going to install ExpoGo. And we get this app installed. And now on Android, you do actually get a button here to scan the QR code. So let's allow ExpoGo to use the video and scan the QR code.
Again, but all of this is using is, of course, is jar star, which means jar and star, which means is that particular script to run the JavaScript bundle size, right? So how can we now run this in our terminal or in our device? By scanning that QR code like this. All right. Unfortunately, here they have now the specific script that actually run is behind the scenes. That might be because I know what it is. I need it to is in fact run this with the flag. Let me see if I actually store that with that particular flag. No, okay. So expo flag. So this is for a proxy. Expo CLI developing a plugin. Or in this case, I want to run now jar here, but with the tunnel. Exactly. which means is, hey, I want to now run with the tunnel that is here. But of course it will fail for that. Unless I do something like this. Or I don't need to include the protocol here. How did I solve that? So of course both of them are on the same network, but yeah, I know that I have to do something like that. I need to add that tunnel here, which is tunnel. And I think if I go back to another one, which is I want to now open up in code the package JSON here. So not at all. Well, anyway. Taskly. Alright. So, yeah, because when I do this, yarn star, and then I try to get into that, for some reason it doesn't allow me to get it, but I know that I have to pass some sort of instructions to there. So we are on the same network here. Come on, man. What's wrong? What's wrong with you? No? Okay. Just not expo. Open up again. We are on the same network, but for some reason it's not able to do that. Because it thinks that we are it thinks that we are not in the same network. I want to now expose that to the proper port. So in my case, I'll need to install is that, the ngrok, and then start a tunnel for that. Yep. That may be some stuff here that are relevant for the iOS, because it's not able to expose that, and so he can't have access to some sort of security measure. It's okay, man. It's okay. Doesn't matter. So we run this with a tunnel command, say yarn star, and now it runs that with a tunnel. Tunnel connector created, that's right. Now when we scan this, okay, go back, No. Scan the QR code. Now, because it exposed this, we are now able to access to our application. It's actually loading and bundling a little bit this, and there you got it, right? We're already connected, and you can see that bridgeless mode is enabled. This is for newer versions, right? The JavaScript log will be removed from Metro in React Native 0.77. Please use React Native Dev tool and default tool tip. Type G in the terminal to open and require Chrome on that. If I do this, it's now launching the debugging tools in a Chrome. Alright. That's quite interesting, by the way. Again, this is newer versions.
And we have our app running. Now, the reason that the iOS app doesn't have a button is because Apple doesn't allow it. So the Xbox app wouldn't be allowed on the App Store. It's basically that's where the restriction comes from. But so that's why they're different. All right. So with these, the debug things that are worth knowing is that if you shake your phone, this is where you get your debug menu.
So the
debug menu
if you shake
will
your
have
phone,
an
you
option
actually
to
get
reload.
that.
You can show the performance monitor. You can open the JavaScript debugger,
Okay.
or you can disable fast refresh. So the disabling fast refresh you would usually only do accidentally. So if your app is no longer updating, check that you haven't accidentally disabled it. But most of the time, what you use here is you'll want to reload the app for any reason. And actually, shaking your phone might be a bit annoying. So actually, on iOS, you can also, if you hold 3 fingers to the screen, it will also open the dev menu. Just handy.
All right.
Alright, and I am actually going to open this on an iOS simulator because it will be a little bit easier to see on my screen for the workshop. So iOS simulators, you will get this if you have Xcode installed, which isn't necessary for this workshop, but we'll do that in the intermediate one. And I just wanted to call out that we used a TypeScript template, and you might be wondering whether you have to use TypeScript, but we'll do that in the intermediate one. And I just wanted to call out that we use...
Well, what?
If you have Xcode installed, which isn't necessary for this workshop, but we'll do that in the intermediate. So iOS simulators, you will get this if you have Xcode installed, which isn't necessary for this workshop.
Oh, for the next
but
one,
we'll
I
do
get
that
it.
in the intermediate one.
Okay.
And I just wanted to call out that we used a TypeScript template, and you might be wondering whether you have to use TypeScript. And honestly, I would very, very much recommend it. The reason being that the JavaScript community, like type information building, I'm not linking to it throughout the course, but I use the same commit names, so you could look it up. But honestly, the difference between this and a TypeScript course is very, very minimal, so I would just do the TypeScript app thing. The reason for it is that this bundler is running on localhost on your machine, so only devices that are connected to the same network will be able to access it. But if you still can't get it to work, or if that's not possible, then there is actually a workaround. So you can run the start command, but with -- tunnel. So the first time you run this, it will prompt you to install ngrok. But then what it's going to do is it's going to expose your bundler externally to the internet using ngrok. And that way, you can actually scan this QR code from any device, on any computer, anywhere in the world, and you will run the bundle from your local machine. And this is incredibly handy if you want to share what you're working on with a colleague or a friend, but also if you want to get around this restriction. So it's quite common on Windows when you have a firewall for this to be a problem. It's a little bit slower than using it normally, so if you can not use tunnel, I would recommend doing that. Alright, before we get into
In my case, I'm going to use tunnel.
coding, I wanted to quickly talk about React Native frameworks. So you might be wondering why in this Introduction to React Native course is the ability to run React code, so some JavaScript code with React, on native iOS and Android platforms, so using the underlying native components. So a huge amount of work goes into making this happen. We have, Metro for bundling, and Hermes, the JavaScript runtime, and JSI, and all kinds of stuff. So this is not an easy feat. And on top of this, we also get some core building blocks, like your text and view and scrollable lists. But a huge amount of things that almost every mobile app needs aren't built into React Native. So for example, we don't get navigation out of the box, we can't send push notifications, we can't store data across app launches, we can't use the phone camera, etc. And there's plenty of things that is possible to do, it's just really hard. So for example, changing the app icon or adding custom native code or just building the app bundles for store release, they're possible, but they're tedious. And this isn't a failing by Meta, this is by design, because adding all of these functionality out of the box would make React Native completely unmaintainable for the really small React team at Meta. So we need to add these ourselves. And from the very beginning, and React Native is literally almost 10 years old now, which is wild. And from the very beginning, React Native developers have had to rely on community libraries for these functionality. And there is also this page here, React Native Directory, which is a great resource for finding various community libraries for React Native. The problem is, if you're only just getting started, it's very difficult to know which libraries are fit for purpose, which work well together, what's even possible, especially if it's at the start of your project. So this is where the React Native framework comes in. So the role of a React framework is defined in the RFC, which you can also look up here. And it's a cohesive framework that's built on top of React Native, and it consists of tools and libraries that are not provided by default in React Native. There's also a bunch of requirements for something to become a framework, but the main thing that's important here is that the framework needs to be open source, popular, and free. So companies may provide additional paid features on top of the framework, but the core of it needs to be free. The paid parts should not be requirements to use the framework, and there should be no vendor lock-in. So there's pretty strict restrictions for something to become a React Native framework. So Expo is the open source React Native framework that we're going to be using throughout this course. In particular, we're using Expo Go. Now this is really important. Expo Go is not Expo. Expo Go is one small part of the Expo framework. It's a sandbox environment that's meant for learning, prototyping, and getting started quickly. It is not recommended to build your production apps with Expo Go. We're using Expo Go today because we're learning about React Native, and this is literally the use case for it. In the intermediate course, we're going to move on to development builds, which is what you graduate to after you outgrow Expo Go. Next up, let's set up linting. Linting is really important. Setting this up is really quick. I very much recommend you do it. As of SDK 51, there is actually a lint command built in. So if you do npx expo lint, it will tell you that you don't have an ESLint config, and would you like to configure one? So let's do yes. And it will install ESLint, it will store some packages, and it will also create an ESLint config for us. And the second thing we want to do is install Prettier. Again, this is just a very strong preference of mine, because to be a good developer, it's good to be lazy, and Prettier lets you focus on the things that are important, which is writing code, not the things that aren't important, which is figuring out where exactly to put the brackets so they look pretty. So I have these instructions here to install Prettier and the Prettier configs, so we have separate instructions for yarn and other, because we want to install them as dependencies.
Wait a second, moment.
And then to integrate Prettier with ESLint, we need to update our ESLint RC to also add it. So this basically extends the Prettier config, it adds the Prettier plugin so that we would have all the Prettier errors as ESLint errors. And I actually see that I'll immediately get some squigglies, because by default Prettier uses double quotes instead of single quotes. So you could create a Prettier RC to change the preference to single quotes, but I'm just going to stick with the default. And the great thing is that Prettier errors tell you that you don't have an ESLint config, and would you like to configure one? So let's do yes. And it will install ESLint, it will store some packages, and it will also create an ESLint config.
Question: is this actually comes from directly the React Native? You know what I mean? Because this is part of the guidelines here. This is the development process, building an app with Expo. What is an Expo app? Exactly, is the development process different for an Expo app and React Native apps? Then what is different in the Expo and Expo applications? One of them is the cloud services. Do I have to use ESS? No. Can I use ES if I'm not using any Expo source tool? Yes. Expo Go, an optional tool for learning, experimental, and prototypal. There is no faster way to spin up a React Native project and run into a device or emulator than Expo Go, especially when combining with Snack. However, Expo Go and Snack are not intended for building production apps. That's fine, but the idea here is to actually stumble upon all the things that we need to learn and learn by doing. If you plan on developing and deploying to your app to the store, then the development build will provide a more flexible, reliable, and complete development process, development environment, development builds, and all that kind of stuff. So the core development loop here. Okay, to make a change to the project, write JavaScript application code, update app config, write native code or modify native configuration, or install a library from npm. Write JavaScript application code, see the change reflected in your app. Okay, write native codes or modify native configuration, create a new development build, cloud-based. However, all of this different stuff that we're looking is based on the recommendations that using library, private manifest, and this is the export router, export model, push notifications, regulatory compliance, data and privacy protections. Regulatory and compliance, data and privacy protections, GDPR, HIPAA compliance, and privacy shield and expo. Okay. Yeah, but this is the Battle, Metro, and Expo. Okay. Run the app on mobile web and all that kind of stuff. Edit the index screen, and there you got it. So here she added some couple of stuff to the underlying layer for that, right? Which is kind of cool. Absolutely. Kind of cool to do that. npm expo lint. Exactly, adding the linting.
It will tell you that you don't have an ESLint config, and would you like to configure one? So let's do yes.
This is because
and it will install ESLint, it will install some packages, and it will also create an ESLint config for us. And the second thing we want to do is install Prettier. Again, this is just a very strong preference of mine because to be a good developer, it's good to be lazy, and Prettier lets you focus on the things that are important, which is writing code, not the things that aren't important, which is figuring out where exactly to put the brackets so they look pretty.
Exactly. So focus on things that are really important, which is now building code, or adding or updating, maintaining the application, not to figuring out configuration and that kind of stuff.
Figuring out where exactly to put the brackets so they look pretty.
Exactly. So, for example, now to put exactly where the bracket is, and so get switch. Here I want to create a branch that is the component and styling, which is the component and styling, right? Like this. Then you have navigation. Then down the line you have input, user access, device interactions, and all that kind of stuff. And building a recurring. A recurring reminder component. Okay. So let's get into this. Git switch -c component styling. There you go. Yep.
So I have these instructions here to install Prettier and the Prettier config. So we have separate instructions for yarn and other because we want to install them as dependencies.
Okay. One of the things for install is the Prettier. Okay, if you're using yarn or if you're using any other package. npm expo install like that. Again, very narrow specific to expo. Here we are installing is the installing the what it is. There you go. Installing is the linting and the formatting, right? As well as the linting formatting.
And then to integrate prettier with ESLint, we need to update our ESLint RC to also.
Okay. So, because we don't have our linter source here, then we need to update that. The ESLint source. So it's going to create now that file says ESLint source. This is a private ESLint source. I think it is ESLint. Oh, ESLint source .gs, which means is exactly ESLint RC. Exactly, it's ESLint RC. That's right. And here we're gonna put all of this configuration that must come from at least the documentation, right? So I don't see anything related to that. So for example, like linting, right? Overview of linking. No, this is linking. That's interesting. ESLint. Okay. Okay. Using ESLint and prettier for that. Okay. So here's what you can use now the ESLint and prettier for that. So also it's an exploration of the documentation. Another reason why we are doing is this. .md exactly. ESLint and prettier. This is our Taskly app. Alright. So this is the application that we're gonna build here, right?
Hello, satisfying and essential. People into the amazing already features. We're going to have all the commands that you need. And at the end of this warning is usually we're going to be learning by doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a little utility app completely from scratch. We're going to start from the blank template. And I'm going to introduce various concepts and point out common patterns in React Native development as we go on. This app is going to have two main features. We're going to have a shopping list. It's going to be a fancy shopping list. And a reminder.
Okay. A shopping list and a reminder. A shopping list and a reminder. So first is this one. So that is the ESLint and prettier. This is pretty standard ESLint and prettier, right? You have this one. So ESLint and prettier, like so. We want to take a look at this. You might do that exactly. The one to prefer to put is something like this. Exactly. So ESLint and prettier. So using ESLint and prettier. Below a common workflow to init a project. or below a common docs ref, below the greatest hit, right, in doc ref use. So you have now here, that's right. So now it makes a lot of sense to go into that and then do something about it, right? Recommended if you're using VS Code, install the ESLint extensions, that kind of stuff. For SDK 50 and below, and for SDK greater, after ESLint has been configured, which is something that you must install. ESLint, the JavaScript linter helps you find error. This guy helps you to set up on that, which is the setup, install and configure ESLint. Here you can actually have that. Okay, this is how you can configure that. You are not able to see that, but is this. This is how you can configure the ESLint and prettier. That's right. We actually install this, or in our case, this one. Install require ESLint configuration manually. For other package manager, do this. For Yarn, do this. There is a reason why, because, well, this is now backed by Facebook and Facebook Pulse. So, and this is pretty much what we're doing here. You know, extend expo. There is also a particularly linting process.
Next up, let's have all the prettier errors as.
Right. So it's not only that, but this particularly source are coming from this, where you're not only going to paste these configurations, which is something that is quite not relevant for self. I mean, it is, but this is not actually how we want to spend our time here. We say expo and prettier. We already installed prettier. We say expo and prettier. Alright, makes a lot of sense. And we have the plugins as an array, where you say, hey, we already installed this prettier, and the rules that I want you to follow. And there is prettier error.
ESLint reference to single quotes, but I'm just going to stick with the
rules, which is, hey, this is an object that has this key and value, which is the prettier, so prettier slash prettier. Did I write it? Did I put it right? With double T. Yep. Prettier. And show me only the errors here. Okay.
Default. And the great thing is that prettier errors are auto-fixable. So if you run your lint command, yarn lint or npm run lint, etc., with --fix, it actually auto-fixes all of these.
So if you run this command, which is npm or yarn
lint or npm run lint, etc.,
exactly,
with
yarn
--fix,
/fix,
it actually auto-fixes all of these. And if you have an editor like VS Code,
hey, I don't recognize that command because I didn't implement it. Because I don't have that command. Will you provide me that?
And would you like to configure one? So let's do yes.
Exactly. So we need to exactly configure the linting, which means add that lint to our script It add that lint, and then with this command we can now is run this. ESLint command was not found. Oh, it's because we didn't install that? No, we did. Yep, we did. In the dev dependency, ESLints, yep, they're already installed. npx expo lint.
And would you like to configure one? So.
Let me remove this one for a moment. Put all of this content here. And then say something like this. npm expo lint. It will say, would you like me to configure one? Yes. And then he installed the necessary dependency to configure ESLint. That's when I install or when I add the ESLint source like this. And then I extend a little bit this rules for that. Okay. And now when you run that particular command, you say npmx run lint dot fix. It actually runs, say, hey, no. I get it. Jar lint with a flag fix. It actually run all of that and say, hey, there you go. Oops, something went wrong. ESLint source configuration for roles period is invalid. Severity should be follow or 2. Okay, it is now because it's okay. There you got it. Alright, cool. So now you have a command that actually links your code anytime you do something. This is useful for CI/CD process.
And then to integrate
And
prettier
all that
with
kind of
ESLint, we need to update our ESLint RC. Alright, from React Native code. Finally, right?
Okay.
So we're going to
Holy moly. So git status, say git add. I don't know why you changed that. Because I didn't change anything like that. Say git add everything here. Git status, say git add the ESLint source. That's right. And then you now make a commit here to say, hey, you know what? Well, this is git commit with a message. Git. This is now setup linting and formatting. Setup linting and formatting. Okay. Good. So now we can push this orient the component styling branch. Do that. There you got it. So we're gonna make that change yesterday or tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. Setup linting and formatting. There you got it. Using ESLint and this one for that. All right. Cool. Now, that'll be all. that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.